Do you need to level up your role-playing? Well, you might need a dungeon coach.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt, and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and better role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. If you need some help preparing for your games, swing by DiceGeeks.com. I have free dungeon maps, character sheets, and many other resources right there that you can grab and use in your games. I also create books that help you cut down your game master prep time. So check those out. It is my privilege to bring you an awesome new interview each and every Wednesday. So let's just dive in to the interview today. My guest is known as the Dungeon Coach on YouTube, Alan Bjorkgren. Alan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, man. It's weird hearing you say that. Known as the Dungeon Coach.
Still
sinking in.
Yeah, still sinking in. Well, that is kind of your deal there on YouTube, right?
Oh yeah, no, it's been a crazy journey to do this thing. I've loved Dungeons and Dragons, but I just wanted to share it with more people, and this has absolutely blown up more than I ever thought it would. My goal was 1,000 subscribers around this point, and now we're around almost 6.
Yeah, as we record this. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you said you just love Dungeons and Dragons, when did you first start playing Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, my wife accidentally got me into Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if she regrets that moment because I kind of get very obsessive. In every hobby I've ever done, I've just been absolutely obsessed. And this is I dove into it. My wife was selling clothes at a bar, like a brewery. And I was like, I joined with her. I carried it around. I set up the shop, and I'm just sitting there, not very engaged with clothes selling, right? And I look in the corner, and there's this screen up, and these dice and these figures. I was like, oh, are they playing Dungeons and Dragons? Like, okay, I want to let me kind of check it out. I've always heard, but I'm a nerd, but not that much. No way. and then I kind of go over there, and they're in a little break. They're kind of eating and drinking and stuff. I was like, y'all playing D&D? And they're like, yeah. And so long story short, they start to tell me what's going on. I was like, wait, you just say what happens? And how do you know if it happens or not? Like, would you roll the dice? I'm like, well, is there limits? And they're like, no. I was like, are you serious? And they blew my mind. And I was like, I have to play this game. So then I messaged everyone I knew, which is pretty much only like 4 people. And luckily they all said yes. And we started to play. And it was, oh man, the best thing I've ever done.
But now that wasn't too long ago, was it?
No, that's the funny part is, a lot of times like, oh, you're a D&D YouTuber and I got these different, homebrew ideas, homebrew this, homebrew that. But I've been playing probably about 4 years, which might be surprising. But I absolutely love it. I mean, I've always done, like any game I've played, I've done like beta testing and stuff, and been and helped out with some indie game development stuff of just manipulating rules. And what if we did this, or what if you gave this character this ability or that character this ability? And making board games when I was little. So I've always been anything I've done of homebrewed. Even like Monopoly board game type stuff. I'm like, what if the rules were this? And just trying to shake up the different games. And have you ever played One Night Ultimate Werewolf?
Oh, is that the game that's kind of like Mafia?
Mafia.
Yes, yeah, I've played it once. Yeah.
My God, I love that game. So I was obsessed with that game. This was right before D&D. And I started making my own cards and making my own creatures and abilities. And I just have always loved doing that. So then whenever I found Dungeons and Dragons, I was like, I have been built for this my whole life. I did a theater major in high school. I've always loved, acting or doing character voices and stuff. And then creativity and stuff. It was amazing. So I wish I found it sooner, but no, it really wasn't that long ago.
But yes, as people can tell, you've kind of jumped in with both feet, right?
I mean, that's what I've always done with any hobby of mine. Has just been probably to some unhealthy extents. Like I was probably D&Ding for 60 hours a week, like DMing and then making a world building. Yes, world building, and just continuously building this homebrew campaign, which was my first one. I would not recommend doing a 3-year-long campaign as your first campaign ever, pure homebrew with homebrewed classes and other things. But I just went for it and fell in love with it.
Well, now I did some of that stuff, but I was like 10 years old or 12 years old, and I had a little bit more time on my hands. How did you have so much time with like a family? And I assume that you saw some of your loved ones at some point. During
not very much sleep. Not very much sleep. I would literally like in the car. I don't listen to music. I know that people think I'm a sociopath when I say that, but I don't really listen to music. So I just literally think about D&D in the car. I'd have little notes and I have a little voice recording thing, or I'd make verbal notes to myself. I'm coaching. I teach and coach is my career. So I'd be at like a track meet and I would be like, oh, I have an idea. And I'd like stop and I'd write my little GM binder and I'd start writing that down. So like I'd find time. I'd sit in bed with my binder. You know, my wife would go to bed and I'd stay up and think and create. So I think that was interesting. And I think I see it as an advantage is coming to the game later is whenever you're 9 and 10, no offense to your 9 or 10-year-old brain, right? But I approached it in this very creative adult mind, you know, later in life than probably maybe most people. But I just kept trying to push the limits of the game and like, oh, this is 5th edition. What was cool from 4th edition? So then I went and read 4th edition and cherry picked the things I like from that and other cool role-playing games. So, but as far as time, usually it's just a sacrificing sleep to where I probably got about 4 or so hours of sleep a night just to go crazy with stuff, which, you know, I try to get a little more now, but especially with a kid. We just had a kid. He is at this point 7 weeks old, so he was not there initially.
Yeah, I guess if you cut out sleep and you didn't have any kids at that point, I could see how you could do that. But yeah. Now, I mean, you know, like I said, you know, I first played D&D when I was 9, and I did a similar thing. But I think I think that was a good point that you brought out, that you kind of approached it obviously as an adult, where I was right. Still quite a child. But there were days when all I did was D&D when I was a kid, right? Because there's something about
no responsibility.
Yeah, no responsibility. But there is something about Dungeons and Dragons where if you have this certain type of imagination, or you can just go as deep as you want in as many directions as you want. And like when I played the first time, I was just like, this is a game, like you can do this. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And like I just went home, you know, like, and like I was just like doing that. That's all I did. Dungeons and Dragons, right? Cartoons, yeah. But Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. But like that's what blew my mind at that brewery table is like they were fighting and there was a waterfall. And somebody polymorphed an Umber Hulk, which I didn't even know what an Umber Hulk was at that point, into a snail, and then threw it into the waterfall. And like, I was like, "What is going on? Like, how did you know to do that?" And they're like, "Well, I just wanted to do it." I was like, "I can't." And there's so many times where my little homebrew brain, whenever I'm thinking about like different video game mechanics, I was a huge video gamer, World of Warcraft for very long time. It's a whole nother conversation. But you can't do things if the game hasn't programmed you to be able to do it, right? So as soon as you take that off the table, I was like, oh my God, like this is infinite possibilities. Yeah,
that used to be one of my kind of my selling points, especially like when I was in high school. You know, I would talk to guys and be like, "Hey, do you want to play a role-playing game?"
Right.
And they'd be like, "Oh, I don't know, what's it like?" And I would be just like, "Hey, it's like a video game, but there are no limits that are programmed in. You know, where it says, hey, you're heading towards the edge of the map."
Right.
That doesn't happen.
There is no edge of the map, and there's not like a certain combo that you can only press these buttons and do this combo. And if you thought of this combo, you can't do it because those buttons don't exist to do that thing.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, I love it. So it's been so cool to where I started playing right as a player because I wanted to be a player like first before I DM'd because I felt like that was at least a prerequisite. I was crazy, but not that crazy. So one of the guys was like, "No, I've played before," and he played first, since he was little. So I was like, "Okay, cool, you'll DM." And then it was 1 DM and 3 players, and I was a barbarian dragonborn because I just love dragons and I just had to be a dragonborn. And we played 3 sessions. I was like, "All right, give me the reins, let me go." And then just dove right into it. So I had 3 sessions under my belt, and then I was like, "All right, homebrew campaign, here we go."
Oh, that is
and
awesome.
Then 3 years later, we wrapped the whole thing up, and it was absolutely the craziest thing I've been a part of as far as a shared story that people tell together. Yeah.
When I said I played when I was 9, the first time that I was the game master or the dungeon master was the next day. And I ran my mom through a dungeon, right? And I really didn't.
Mom, come on.
Mom, you got to try this. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, all this humor is this kid. What is this kid doing? At least he's not, at least he's not committing crimes or something." Right?
That's great.
And I hardly knew any of the rules. It was just basically like roll a 20. If you roll a 14 or higher, you hit. You roll 13 below, you miss or something. I don't even know what I was doing. But I always find it interesting though when I'll talk to some people and they're just like, "Yeah, I want to play more before I run a game." And I'm like, how long have you been playing? And I'm thinking a week or a couple months or something. And they're like 15 years. And I'm just like, what? I don't know. Maybe there's just a different type of person who's the dungeon master or something. I don't know.
Well, I think people put it on a pedestal of this big expectation, and you do take on more, you have more responsibilities, there's more on your plate. Yes. So, but the only question is, are you down to just do that? Not can you, or have the ability to? You'll learn that. And the players will go with you. You'll make mistakes. Of course, you're going to screw. You're not going to know how to balance an encounter. You're going to screw it up royally, which is what I've tried to kind of help out with, of taking off that, dread or anticipation or nervousness and just be like, go for it. Just, let it roll.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. When you say people put it on a pedestal, they think you need like kind of all of these different types of skills and stuff. And for some reason people who, they'll sit at a table with a dungeon master who makes mistakes and who, who does things wrong. And they're just like, "But man, it was a blast. I had a ton of fun." And it's just like, don't you think that'll happen when you make mistakes and stuff? Like
same thing. Exactly.
Yeah. People are just going to have fun as long as you're not being like a total jerk about everything. But I mean, that just goes for life, I think.
Right. Well, I always just say, be fair and consistent. It doesn't matter how often you mess up. Just be fair and consistent. So if you do something one way, then do it. Keep doing it that way. So I mean, don't be a real rules lawyer. And me myself, it was kind of funny. One of the players in my campaign was very rules heavy. Very, very rules heavy. And because he played for years and years and years. And then he gets me as a DM. And I was like, "Yeah, man, let's just do this thing. This is cool. Homebrew. And I remember one of the first creatures I threw at him, this homebrew creature I did, was a dragon creature, of course. Every time you hit it, it had like an acid belch attack that was like a cone in front of it. Right? So every time you hit it, it happened, which breaks the rules because a creature only has one reaction, and a reaction if a pawn hit it. But I was like, "Dude, no, stop it. Just it's good. Every time you hit it, it's going to do this thing." So he had to think outside the box and okay, move around it to this left side, then hit it. Then the creature turned to him. Then he keeps moving around it, hit it, just to try and shake him out of that stagnant rule of no, these things can only do this and this things can only do that. So that was interesting to see him kind of get thrown into my homebrew world.
No, I think there are certain players like that who just know everything, and like I said, they don't have to, they don't have to be like lording it over everybody or anything. Yep. But it can be sometimes, when you pull out a certain creature, and if that person already knows that they have 128 hit points and these things, it can, and all of their resistances, it can be a little, it can just be one of those things where you're just like, oh, well, he knows everything about it already. Yep. And you just kind of have to go with it. But, that's where homebrewing kind of comes in, where you can do something just a little bit different. And the person's sitting there going, oh my gosh, that's new.
Wait a second. Yeah, I can't. Because literally he would pull out his book. He would bring all the books to the sessions we'd have. And then we start fighting. I think one time I threw a fire giant at him or something. And I just described it as a fiery type giant. It literally, and so he pulls out his book. It goes to the fire giant page. I was like, bro, I literally didn't look at the page. Like, like what you're looking at right now, I never even looked at it. Like, stop. Like, so I am like that level of homebrew to where like, I use the creatures as inspiration, and I make sure it's balanced, and I make sure it's this. And it's been a long journey to get to the point where I'm at now, to where I just make it up literally, like without looking at a book or anything. But I love the fact that they can't know, like, oh, it has this much health and its armor class is this and it's no, you have no idea. And if you fight this thing and you fight another one like from a different spot, he's going to be totally different, because that makes sense too.
Yeah. And now, do you make up a lot of this stuff on the fly, or do you prepare it all? Like, how do you prepare?
I definitely prepare. I definitely prepare. I think that's even just like a side note of, I feel like the DMs, it's like just part of the mantle you take on of like, I'm going to prepare to make sure the session's good, so that at least it doesn't run into the, and then the session's crap because you weren't ready, but as far as preparing combat encounters, like I definitely make out the stat blocks. I make out the abilities, the health, the armor class and stuff. Sometimes with the health, whenever I was earlier on, I would like, all right, like I want them to survive 3 hits. What would that take? Mm-hmm. And I would like calculate what my player's average hit was. Like, what could my players do in a round? And then I'd base the health backwards on that of like, okay, if they all target this creature, it would at least survive 2 rounds. Okay, cool. And then its health would be that number, right? So then I started doing stuff like that. Or as far as on the fly, I will adjust on the fly if I need to, based on, how would I describe it? Based on the experience they're getting for what I was trying to give them, right? Especially earlier on when I was like brand new and I didn't know what I was doing, and I wanted this to be a hard fight, but they were stomping on it. I was like, oh, well, there goes that. and then this huge, big, epic moment that was supposed to be a big, epic moment that they get these really cool items from, and then they save the village or whatever, doesn't mean as much because they just walked in there and then stomped on it, right? So yeah. I would definitely intervene and like buff up something or have some big like, oh, this big ability that's now revealed, boom, and they're like, oh no, okay, wow, and just to kind of like spice it up or challenge them to make sure that they get the feel that I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Now, I ask you about how you prepare in that because, I have written a small little book called the No Prep Game Masters. So I tend to, go the other way, especially now. And
I have more so over time started to challenge myself in that way. Mm-hmm. So I have okay. So you said that, I have a game that I run for, some high school kids, right? I have, I'm a high school teacher, right? So mm-hmm. I have a group of, about 5 kids, and I was like, how little can I prepare and still tell a great story? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and still have a great experience. And that's when I started to push myself down that direction of the No Prep Game Master of like, I'd have a world and a story and like, I know what's going on, but like, sometimes like the fights, they would just come out of nowhere, and I'd give them the abilities and armor classes on the fly, and stuff would happen on the fly, and it was just kind of, everything's kind of like just going. So I can totally see that too.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I just had a number of problems, right? Like when I was, I just didn't have any time anymore. I'm right. Married. I have, at least at this point, I have 3 children. We will see. There might be more, but it just became like impossible for me. Like I would do, years before, just kind of as a hobby, when I'm sitting, instead of playing a video game, I would just make a D&D world or something, but it just became like pretty much impossible. But then I also noticed I did a couple things that were a little crazy, right? Like first, if I had kind of a full fleshed out story in my mind, or I get this really good story idea, I would tend to railroad my players, right? I would tend to ram them through like my novel or this great movie that I have in my head. And so that was a problem. And then when I got rid of kind of the railroading, I went totally the opposite way, right? I went sandbox, complete sandbox, prepared,
aimless
all
sandbox,
kinds of stuff.
Right.
What is that?
I was saying like the players can get lost in a big aimless sandbox and they don't know where to go, or they have so many different options. But it's also way harder to prepare a massive open world.
Yeah, because what my problem was, right, is what I was doing is I was preparing for almost every possible conceivable, thing that could come up. Of course, my players would always pick something that I hadn't prepared. So
of course,
I would have all this stuff. So I kind of just came to the point to where, I wasn't going to do either of those, but I would give them a sandbox, but I wasn't going to prepare for anything. And then if I had ideas and stuff, I would just kind of present those situations kind of on the fly or at the beginning of something, and just seeing how my players reacted to it. If they weren't into it, it doesn't bother me. We could just drop it and I would just move on to something else. And
that's cool.
And just be, kind of just move my prep to kind of, driving someplace while, thinking while I'm driving someplace, taking a shower. Yeah. I'm just thinking about it when I'm reading a book or reading, watching a movie.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
I just kind of like, that's a waterfall with like an underground, thing, in the lake. Oh, I'll just throw that in there and see what my players do with it. And, and I know that takes, and, like I said, I've been playing, I've played Dungeons & Dragons since I was 9. I've been playing role-playing games for a long, long time. And so,
well, and that's what I was about to say is you, the difference between us, the very opposite difference is, you were 9, I was, 4 years ago. So it's something that I started to push myself to do with less prep, because man, I was probably prepping for a 4-hour session. I'd probably prepare about 12 to 16 hours.
Wow.
It was insane. Right. Because I did have a sandbox. I did have this wide open world. If they did go here, I would pre-balance the encounters every single time. So if there was a split between it, if they went to this city then, or this city, I would balance the encounters right then for them at that level. And then like they wouldn't go to the, they do option B. So then by the time they come back around to A, I'd have to rebalance it again. So now I'm double doing the work to rebalance, like how's it changed? What's going on? So it was awful because it took so much time. Now it was a learning process, and it got to the, I got much better and learned the game much better because of it, faster in a shorter period of time. But then I wanted to challenge myself of like, how little can I do? And kind of what I was saying about, it's on the DM to take on their mantle of, I need to prepare a good session. Well, how good of a DM are you? And can you prepare a session and only do it in the shower and in the car? And if you can, then you're an awesome DM and you're good to go. And then that's props to you for being able to, practice that much to be able to do that.
I just know because one thing that I hate hearing is I hate people saying, "Oh, I don't have time to run a game. I don't have time to be the dungeon master," or I hate that, because that means there's some people out there that aren't getting to play. Right? Like,
because we're in a crisis of not enough DMs.
And then this kind of this this idea, like we talked about before a little bit, just putting the dungeon master on a pedestal. I think some dungeon masters kind of cultivate that a little bit, right? And I might have done that when I was younger, a little bit immature as well, just like being like, oh, now they're all looking at me and I came up with this genius idea, when actually I'm just running them through a story that I read in this book that I knew none of them had read.
Yeah.
like I was saying, I just hate to hear people say, "Oh, well, I can't GM right now. I don't have time. I don't know the rules well enough." I mean,
well, right, because if you expect yourself to have to know every single rule and know how every single class that your players are playing and all of their abilities and how all of their spells work and the story that you're playing, and it's a sandbox and it's a homebrew world, and the cleric wants to know what deity is over, like, oh god, like no, does not have to be like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, I think too, I guess maybe because a lot of people play online and maybe they don't know their players very well. I play with friends that I've known now for a long time, and we still play almost every week. Depends on a lot of stuff, but our schedules and stuff. But we play a lot, and just a few years ago when we first started playing, 5th edition, like something came up, like one of the characters is on a horse and he's going to do horse combat, and I'm just
mounted combat. Yep.
Mounted combat. I'm like, I have not run mounted combat in this system yet. I'm trying to remember. I read the book, but I can't remember what it says.
Like,
everybody
what sounds right, guys. Yeah.
Everybody at the table was like, yeah, us too, right? Like, I don't remember mounted combat. So, like, not to slow down the game, right? I just kind of made up something. He did a turn, and then the beauty of nowadays, right? Like, I have my laptop there. I just opened up something, looked it up, found some mounted combat rules. And by the time it was his next turn, I just said, okay, what you did that last time, I just made that up. Here's the actual rule. Here's what you can do. And like, what do you think? He complaining and storms out? No, he's like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's roll. Like, it's not that, like, and I think the pedestal thing, but it's like the people you're playing with aren't going to crucify you for, like, and if they are those kind of players, you probably don't want to play with those people anyway. Yeah. If they are going to be like, oh, no. We need to go back. We need to retcon the whole thing. We need to go back, do that turnover again with the correct rules. Like, no.
Yeah. The dungeon master and the players, if we're all being kind of like normal, sane people and not being like monstrous jerks or something, we can just all work together and get it out. I mean, and just a week or two ago, right? I'm running a session. One of my players knows the rules backwards and forwards. I was going to do something and I said this, and he was like, actually, the rule is like this. Like, he's not looking in a book. I'm not looking at the book. Right. So I'm just like, yeah, let's do it your way. You're probably right? He knows the rule. He knows the rules. And it's just like, well, like, I just think, like we've been talking about, you don't have to be like this other thing, this elevated being to run a game. If you get the basic concept of a role-playing game, you can run a session.
Well, and I think one of the biggest things, earlier on when I first started my YouTube channel, a lot of the people were like fresh, brand new people that were wanted to play. Like, wanted to play. Like, a lot of friends of mine or acquaintances of mine that like, oh, this is maybe this is cool. Let's try it out, and like, who's going to be the DM and all that kind of stuff. So if you're a group of brand new people, then it should be even less pressure because nobody knows the dang rules, and you should all be in on it together. You're not going to have to, it's not like you're being a paid DM that you're going to DM for some group you don't know. Like, that would be stressful. Yeah. Maybe DM for a couple of years before you do that. But it's just a group of people, like you said, coming together, having some fun and working on it together. You're just telling the story together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're a professional dungeon master, you should probably prepare some things and know some rules. I would agree, but yeah, right. If we're just friends all coming together, I mean,
nothing. Yep.
Yeah, and you have fun and you're laughing and you have some good memories. I mean,
for sure.
Nobody's going to remember that I screwed up mounted combat rules in 5-10 years or whatever.
Oh, I know, exactly. And what's so funny is like you were saying, you're talking about this no prep DM, and the thing I try to push myself and challenge myself with. So many cool moments have came from that exact campaign that I prepared virtually nothing for in comparison to what I started off doing. But like we started for session 0, or I guess it was session -1, because we didn't even really have a session 0 yet. They were just like, "What's D&D?" And I'm telling these high school kids, we're at a track meet. We just finished up, and we're just kind of waiting for the other events to finish. And they're like, what is D&D? I was like, well, like, what kind of characters do you want? And they just started talking. I was like, where are you at? Like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm a party planner. All right, you're throwing a party. What's at this party? Okay, cool. And then I had the party ransacked by a bunch of bandits and then they're having like, whoa, what's happening? Whoa. And like, it was such a cool moment that they all reference now. And there's so many inside jokes from that they have with each other on. And it's like, that just came out of nowhere.
No, so and that's awesome. And I agree. I mean, there are just some little things that I could text or message a friend of mine and just like say like one or two words, and they would just be like cracking up because something happened 15 years ago in a session or something like that. So I mean, I think it's just I think it's just fantastic. But now, like, it is interesting for me, like I was saying, I started playing when I was 9. Of course, that wasn't like a couple of years ago. It was like 1982. We went through some dark times with Dungeons and Dragons, where Dungeons and Dragons kind of faded out of popularity. And
I've heard about all that.
It was very hard to find somebody to play D&D. Really, kind of the West End Star Wars role-playing game system kind of kept role-playing, alive for me, because I was able to teach people how to play it really easy. It was a very simple system, but like it was very hard to get, to find people who were playing D&D or to make the investment in some of the books and stuff, and to make a character at that time, like spending 8 hours to make a character and things, which the characters were awesome. I'm not, bagging on them. They were awesome. They were amazing, but it was just really hard, to kind of play. Now you coming to this, you're in the golden age, right? I mean, know, right? D&D is exploding.
Huge,
yeah. So, I don't know. Like, to me, it's just kind of blowing my mind. And of course, I really do show my age when I say, like, I didn't really see coming like actual play, right? Like that people would watch.
Oh, right.
Play. Like I just didn't.
There'd be millions of people that watch people play online, Critical Role, and doing these things and having this outpouring of crying, breaking Kickstarter records and all these different things that D&D is doing now. Isn't it like one of the most top selling books on Amazon too? The Player's Handbook?
Yeah,
like,
it's
insane.
It was number one for a while, and then
yes.
I was checking. That was in 2014, but then what was it? Last Christmas was. I pay attention now since I write books now, but I think it was last Christmas. It went to number one again, and then Matt Mercer's book, The Explorer Guide to Wildmount, I think hit number one for like 5 days or 7 days or something like that. Yeah, which is
that's insane. Like that's so cool, and it's also kind of cool. Like just like even the culture of it is like a lot of my friends now that I'm like doing this whole YouTube thing, they have more questions, and they always like, so what even is it? And I start to explain like, oh, I mean that's kind of cool. And I've never sat down with somebody and if they want to explore and like, hey, like let's just play for like a 10-minute thing so I can show you what it's like that. No one's ever left that being like, oh, that was lame. Like every single person I've ever ran like even a 10-minute blip of a game for has been like, I totally see I see it now. Like it's so cool.
Again, for me, like I just can't believe that you can actually like hop over to YouTube and learn how to play or get Dungeon Master advice from a whole bunch of people. And like I was just making it up, right? I was just like trying to figure it out. It's like, and if I got to disposal now, if I got to talk to somebody, like if I was at school or something, and somebody. Actually one of my one of these guys who's like still one of my best friends, like we became friends because I like walked into like 8th grade. I walk into the room and he's like sitting there reading a Ravenloft book. He's got it like sitting up in front of him, and I'm just like walk right over to him and is like, do you play D&D? And he's like, yeah. And it was like, we've been friends for like however long now,
Oh my gosh.
Because it was just like, or if I've met somebody who's just like, oh yeah, I've played. I always be like, hey, have you run a game? And they're like, yeah, oh my gosh.
What did you do here?
Yeah.
So many questions.
How do you do it? Like, I'm just making all this stuff up. Like, how do you
what happens if this happens? Have you ever had that happen? Yeah, I do this. Oh, that's a great idea.
Exactly.
Oh man.
Exactly.
Well, it's so funny. Like, I did my most recent live stream. The very first question was, how can I get better at DMing faster? Right. And I like the thing that I did, and I think I'm the perfect person to answer this question because I have compacted, D&D into this very small window in the big scheme of things, small window. Right. But like I would watch Critical Role. Right. And I would pause the video when something would happen. And I would say, what would I do? If I was the DM, how would I adjudicate that? Like, how would I run that off? Right. And I'd be like, okay. And then what check would I ask them for? And then I press play. And then they'd say, I'm like, oh, okay. He said this. Okay, interesting. And so I approached it like a freaking mad scientist or something. And I would do the same thing. And like, if I watched YouTubers live streams about like people ask them questions about how do I do this? And I'm like, I pause it and I'm like, all right, what would I tell this person? I tell this, my ideas. Okay. I press play and I'd listen to that person. So now I had my own thoughts and their thoughts. And I just kept doing that and just reading and watching videos and just so many tools at my disposal that I could only imagine being a 9-year-old trapped without having that. And you find this one person and it's like this, oh my gosh. Whereas now you have like this plethora of information.
Now there is also, I mean, I guess I've heard some people saying, there's, I guess could be a dark side. I guess, people are always saying stuff like that, but that the idea that now everybody who like new game masters, new dungeon masters are just going to try to emulate Matt Mercer or something.
The Matt Mercer effect. Yes.
Yeah. And there's a number of sides to that, right? There are players who expect your game, your dungeon master to be Matt Mercer. There are dungeon masters who think they have to be Matt Mercer, and so
then there's dungeon masters who expect their players to be like the players in Critical Role too.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
If of any of those things, that's what I got affected by, because I was like, oh man, my players aren't role playing. Like they need to have elaborate conversations where we all cry at the table. Like, why aren't they doing this? Like what, come on. And what's funny is a lot of my rules that I have implemented inspire role play. Now I think they're good, but I had the expectation that they were going to do this thing. But now I'm like, okay, maybe I don't cram it down their throats and expect them to do this thing. I give them the opportunity, right? Yeah. But not like expect them to do it. And then that's kind of the same thing on the reverse of the Matt Mercer effect is you don't expect your dungeon master to do voices, Yeah. Like I just so happen to be able to do voices, and I do a lot of different voices, but you shouldn't. I think it all comes down to expectation, just come to the table and just be ready for whatever your DM or players are doing.
Yeah. And I think some of the best advice I heard on that was from when I interviewed him on this podcast, Jason Massey from Dungeons and Randomness. He said, if you're falling into one of those categories, it's like you going to the park to play basketball with your friends and expecting somebody to be LeBron James, right?
And just dunk it. Yeah. Why aren't you dunking? Come on.
Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense, right? So does that mean, oh, well, we don't play then because we're not, we're not Major League Baseball players or major, or NBA level, basketball players. No, of course not. You play, right?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, you get that practice in there and you play. But
I think you should take it as an inspiration. Man, they are so good at role playing. Look at what these small little interactions do. Interesting, and have that be like an impetus of inspiration instead of like, oh, I expect this to be this way, and why aren't this? Yeah, no, I like it.
Yeah, and I think I learned kind of too over the years and decades that I played that usually players go through kind of a cycle. So if somebody's new to playing, they want to see what kind of combat, what can their sword do, what can their spells do.
Yeah.
They want to see all that stuff, and it takes them a little bit of a time to kind of get to the place where you're like, actually, I want some more to this. I want role playing.
Yeah.
So I always keep that in mind if I'm playing in a session and there's a new player. I'm like, okay, well, the new player is going to want to attack and hit everything, where I want to talk to everything. Right?
Yeah.
But
how can we resolve this without conflict?
Yeah. I got that out of my system when I was 9, 10, 11, and 12. Right. So, so they're coming to it. So they're gonna attack things for a while, and now of course there's gonna be somebody out there who's like, no, I played the first time and I talked for 4 hours, about
well, that's
forest
that type of,
or something.
More theatrical person, or they were drawn to the game from those role play elements instead of because me being a video gamer, my first character I made, the Dragonborn Barbarian, I was like, okay, how can I min-max this thing? I'm going to do this feat. I'm going to, multi-class. Here we go. I can multi-class fighter, and I'll be able to like. I was like, oh man. So, but then now I'm like, what's this character about? What are they gone through? Where are they from? what? How are they in it? Yeah. So I'm with you.
Yeah, because it is one of those things when you realize that you don't know, you really don't know how your character would act unless you know some of what makes up their kind of their worldview and some of their outlook on life. And of course, if you just make, a Dragonborn barbarian, he's probably going to hit stuff, right? It's like, he's probably gonna hit stuff.
My family died and people killed them. I don't like those type of people now. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And
elves, I hate elves.
Yes, we've all made those characters. Yeah. And they're fun in their own way.
Right.
But once, you can, you can just kind of grow here and there. But
my first character I made was that barbarian. That very simple. My family died to a bunch of elves. I hate elves now. Dragonborn barbarian. And my second character that I didn't have a chance to make until after I DM'd for a while, and I kind of probably shook out some of that like min-maxer player things. Mm-hmm. I made a halfling whip master that I dual wielded whips, but my backstory was I was a performer. Like a fire whip performer. I'd never fought a thing in my life, but I just was really good at doing tricks with whips. And that was it.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
I was a bard, by the way. I was a bard. So the whips were flutes and I could play them. So and it goes on. But it was such a fun little character. And I gave him the voice of Dobby, and I sounded like I was let's play that. So it was just that was so much more fun of a character to play than the Rutgar rage scale. Just smash things.
Yeah, I know. I do find myself kind of looking at different combinations and saying, oh, how would this, instead of a gnome wizard, how would a, mountain dwarf wizard kind of?
Yeah. Why is he why is he in the mountains? Why is he a wizard in the mountains? How'd that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now, we've been talking a lot about, game mastering or dungeon mastering. What would be a key piece of advice that you would give everybody? I know we've talked about a lot of stuff, but really sitting down to run the game, what's one of your important keys that you would give somebody?
Yeah. And I feel like even I had this one, if I could put it down in one thing, and as soon as you told me we're going to do this interview, I was like, all right, I got to have if I had one thing to say. And I didn't realize it. I'm looking down at it right now. We've kind of been, that theme of it has been almost interlaced through this entire conversation. But my biggest tip would be, as a dungeon master, always push the limits. And what I mean by that is that push the limits of yourself, push the limit of the rules, and push the limits of your players. Because for myself, I always tried to find myself, and this is probably the coach in me. This is a random, athletics statistic, but you need, it applies to other things besides athletics. You need 10,000 hours of practice to become elite or a professional at something, right? Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 10,000 hour rule. But it's not just 10,000 hours. It's 10,000 hours of purposeful practice. Deliberate practice, not just doing it, but doing it with a purpose. So you gave a basketball analogy earlier. If you were to just go play pickup basketball with your friends and just play, that doesn't count towards your actual 10,000 hours. What would count is I need to work on this specific skill. I need to work on shooting 3-pointers and keeping the ball high. I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. But in D&D, it would be, how can I push myself as a game master? What can I do? When I run this big, massive combat, I'm not going to let some of the NPCs slip through the cracks and miss their initiative and forget the layer action and forget legendary actions, I'm going to make sure that I knock out I use all my legendary actions. That's my goal. And so every time I DM'd, I would try to push myself and make things that I knew that were outside of my reach and abilities at the time to try and see if I could handle a big fight with, what if I throw in 2 creatures with legendary actions? Whoa, that's crazy, right? So throw myself into that thing. Did I do it perfectly? No, but I was pushing myself,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
and then even the rules.
Yeah.
Even the rules. Sorry. Even the rules of not to. And we kind of talked about this too with all the homebrew stuff. Challenge the rules. Why is that rule there? Not necessarily just don't do them, but shake it up. What would happen if almost half the videos I've made have been different homebrew rules of what if the rest system worked like this? Why would this feels better? Oh, well, this part of it's broken. Okay, fix that. And just like we've also said, you're at a table with your friends. if you're going to try a homebrew rule, it doesn't mean you can't tweak it, you know? So I think sometimes people are afraid to do homebrew rules and then like, oh, you're just stuck with it. No. If it's broken, like, okay, well, actually now it's this way. Let's fix this. Okay, this feels good now. Okay, cool. We're good. You know?
Thought it was interesting when you said that they're kind of doing the thing with purpose. Nobody has ever said that. You know, I ask a lot of people about their Dungeon Master advice. Nobody's ever really said that, but just thinking about it, when I get into trouble, you know, when I'm when I'm running a game and I get into trouble and I find myself making mistakes and stuff, is when I'm kind of just on autopilot, right? When I'm just kind of, I'm distracted by something, you know, and it might not be, you know, a big deal or something, but like I'm thinking about something else, right? You know, I have life, you know, I have things that go on, you know, maybe I just started thinking about something else, or I'm looking over at something else, or I'm thinking about something else. And then that's when I start making kind of those mistakes. But when, you know, if I'm just kind of show up, and I'm there and I'm kind of looking at, you know, I'm looking at things, you know, if I got a monster, if I got an encounter, if I got these things and I'm kind of looking at them, then that's when, I'm most engaged. I'm having the most fun and my players, you know, are giving me kind of the most feedback that say, hey, that was awesome. You know,
dang, that was cool. Yeah. They're engaged just like you're engaged. Yeah. Well, and I think another thing on that is the purposeful practice is you know, that again, this is still the coach in me, is if you just are going through the motions of something, I'm sure there's a little bit of something like, you're going to get better at it over time. But like, if you really want to get better at it, like I knew for myself, like I ran through it a theater of the mind. I did a theater of the mind combat, right? I just wanted to try it out. I'd never done it. So I did it and it went awfully, and players are constantly confused where they were at. Like, wait, so I'm over, where am I? Like, you know, so I was like, oh gosh. So the next time it came back around, I had goals. I was purposefully like, all right, I'm going to make sure to verbally explain and re-explain where everyone's at, to make sure I clarify that through my speech consistently so that everyone kind of gets the flow and they don't have to stop their immersion and hiccup the whole thing to be like, wait, where am I? You know? And then the second time through, everyone knew where they were at. It worked a lot better. And that was my focus and that was my purpose in that one moment, whether it was, you know, a theater of the mind combat or my descriptions or character voices, or I always had a different goal to try and shake things up with.
I think what you just kind of alluded to right there, you can have a bad round and then pull things back onto things back together, you know, where you're just like, okay, I let that one get away. I know. Yeah. We spent 15 minutes and it was a little loose. I messed up a few things. Let's just pull it back. You know, the next round is going to be a little bit tighter. And then, you know, by the end, it should be good. I think that it does come back to a lot to the attitude, you know, just saying, oh, well, I messed that round up. Oh, I messed that up. Well, it's just like, you know, make the next one better.
Well, and you just brought me to something that I usually follow this up with that I forgot to say in this moment, but I think this ties directly with it, is after a session, break it down. Like what went good, what went bad. You know, a lot of times I would do this with my players that were like those next level players that love to, you know, post session breakdowns. But like, what went good, what went bad? Did you accomplish what you tried to accomplish? Were my descriptions better? Were my voices better? No, I wasn't as consistent. The second time they saw the NPC, I didn't have the voice form as down pat, or I lost track of this, or I didn't do the legendary action or whatever. Like, give yourself, and this is again probably the coach in me, but like feedback of your own session. Like, did I do what I set out to do, or did I fail? And it's okay to fail. You'll fail a lot, especially as the game master. But I think that journey of self-improvement, of evaluating how the session went so that you can be better from it next time and learn from it is huge too.
I always try to ask my players, okay, was it a good session? Did I do something, you know, and, you know, we're good friends. So they'll tell me, you know, pretty straight up, you know, oh yeah, it was awesome. Or, yeah, you know, I've had better or something, you know, and I'm like, okay, what happened, you know? And then, I'll try to, you know, kind of go over those things in my mind, you know, just saying, okay, I ran the Umber Hulk. What did I forgot about the eye thing, right? They have like what is it? The eye, I forget what it's called, but they stare at you and it says like, oh, I forgot how to run that thing, or, you know, where, so, you know, or whatever. So next time I'll do something, I'll make sure to look at, you know, special abilities and stuff like that. I mean, you know, this is always about getting better and always about, just having fun too. I mean,
and it's not always going to land with every player too, because like I had one player that I kept getting feedback from, and he's a very specific kind of player, right? Mm-hmm. So there's one time a session was over, and I always want my players to be very honest, because that's, again, the feedback, constructive criticism, like you just said. Mm-hmm. And there's one session that, man, he was like, that fight was just not the good. Like, I didn't like it because this and this and that, and if you could do this and that, and that this was dumb, and like, now he wasn't maybe the best at saying it, but very like within an hour, one of the other players like, I had such a fun time tonight. It was so cool seeing it. I really like that I did this. I'm like, oh my God, like you don't always going to please everybody at the table. And that's also your job as the dungeon master, ring master, is to keep everyone's style of game in check, to where everyone has a good time, but maybe it's not their exact cup of tea every single time. But
Yeah. And because like you were saying, there's going to be one player who loves combat and enjoys it to the, and then another one, who loves kind of the role-playing interaction. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, it's hard to get both of those in, at the same time, right? We're going to be doing one that plays into that player's likes. And then we're going to do another one, and that plays into this other player's likes. And I think, as I said before, hopefully you're playing with people who are sane and normal human beings,
not crazy either. Just expect you to
and then it will all work out, and you'll have fun. But
and what's also nice on that, what you just said, is like if you do know, if you have a pulse check on your players enough, because I've had this happen where I'm like, man, my combat player really has not had combat, and it looks like in my session prep or whatever, once I run through the whole thing of what might happen in a session, I'm like, this doesn't look like combat's going to happen. Maybe there could be a little bar fight skirmish, just to let him get his hands dirty. It literally, no initiative will be rolled for. It's just going to be like, hey, what are you doing over there? And then like, just they get to flex their muscles a little bit, use their spells in a creative way, feel cool, and then we move on. Just to make sure that player's like, oh, I scratched that itch. To just find these, or the opposite, the social encounter. Like, find some random little thing they can talk to. Okay, cool, it's over. Now we're back to the combat.
Yeah. One of my best pieces of advice for game masters and dungeon masters is something I learned a long time ago, is that you listen to your players while they are at the table.
Yes.
They will say things that they are interested in that I wouldn't have ever thought was very interesting. But now that I've heard them say it, I can weave that in. Or if they come up, or if they come up with something, sometimes they'll come up with better, they always come up with better stuff, right? Like, I'm leading them into they're walking into an inn or something, and like, I have like nothing prepared, and I'm just kind of making it up. And they'll say something, I'll mention some just random detail, and they'll be like, I wonder about that. So this barkeeper, he seems, kind of weird or something. And I'm like, what? Like,
maybe he's working for the Underground Assassins Guild. And you're
exactly.
Like, yes,
and I'm
he
like,
is.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the leader.
That is exactly right. But it was just like, I was just describing somebody, and they come up with this, and I just run with it. Or, Or, I let them think things, right? I'll hear something and they'll say something, and I let them think that. They build in their own red herrings, right? They just,
and you double down on it. So like, you role play this guy even more sketchy now, and they swear he has to be, but he's totally not. He's totally not.
Yeah. And it's the head of the Assassin Guild is actually the innocent looking barmaid who works for him. And,
who's their friend that they made 3 sessions ago. And
Exactly.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, Alan, we've been talking a while, and you said, you had just started playing D&D just a few years back, and, we talked about how you jumped into it. What possessed you then to like take your show onto YouTube and actually create the Dungeon Coach?
Oh, it was definitely a crazy thought I had. Right. I think one of the biggest things is like, my wife got pregnant. Right. And that we had, which this was our first kid. We'd never like, all right, what the heck? So I was like, all right, I'm going to have a kid now. And that might sound like a crazy thing to take on. Let me start a YouTube channel when I have, it's something that takes more time. But I just felt like I love D&D so much. And I've has become such a part of me now that I wanted to share it with more people. And we just wrapped up the campaign, this 3-year-long campaign of this huge epic story. And I was like, man, and I would start, people would ask about it, like that cared about D&D. And I would start telling them the story and they're like, whoa, I've never heard anything like that before. This was, how'd you see it? And so I was, all these different times where I would be able to help people. I was like, I want to try and get this out there to more people. These different homebrew ideas, these different ways to make the game easier. You know, if somebody, like one of my athletes wanted to be a DM, so I was like, oh, I can totally help you with that. And that process was so rewarding to help them be a DM, hear the stories of them being able to DM for their 5 players, and that I was able to put back into the D&D world change that affected more people. That one person I helped ended up helping 5. You know, and like I could trickle out into the world more. So I was like, all right, I want to go for this thing. I want to be able to try and, you know, the sappy things about like my son seeing that I can go help people and be creative and show people how to be more creative and inspire them to be creative. And being able to try to help other people's experiences from the big experience that I just finished wrapping up with this 3-year story I told with my close friends. If I could enhance other people's and just contribute in any way to that, I thought that would be awesome. So I just went for it because I knew a lot of the ideas that I hadn't heard before. And like I said earlier, when I would listen to other YouTubers that I'd been watching, they'd have Q&A live streams and stuff, and I'd be like, what about this though? Like this would be a good idea. Like I want to tell people this, you know? And I felt like I wanted to try and have a platform to be able to share creative ideas and inspire people to be creative in this awesome creative game. So it has been the most rewarding thing I've gone to do.
And that's amazing. That's amazing. And like I think we were mentioning a little before we started recording, it's just a fascinating time that we're in, that we just have this ability just to hop onto YouTube, something like YouTube, and to start a channel and start letting people know about our games and that. And then, so on your channel, most of your videos are about like homebrew content and DM advice.
Well, and that's kind of like when I first started off, I was like, all right, well, what do you guys want to see? Session 0. Yeah. That's my first video, Session 0, with awful lighting, awful pauses and edits and all the good stuff. I should really take it down. I'm just kidding. But my Session 0. Yeah. And then like, how to choose a class, you know, like all these different things. And then I was like, man, I really want to do these homebrew ideas, but homebrew, I didn't want to be, not that it's a controversial topic, but I wanted to like think outside the box. And that was like my whole, all right, I'm going to go for it. And then I did like homebrew rules, and it was my most successful video. And I was like, all right, skill challenges. How do I do skill challenges? And that was my second most successful video. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to go all in on this homebrew thing, because that's who I am. That's the big value I have of the game. I was nervous about it, but then this has been kind of the big homebrew journey I've gone down to just really push the limits on it. Like this week's video, which I guess this is released way later, but it's like fixing counterspell. This was the video for this week. Different rest mechanics, different travel mechanics, all the different type of stuff that people can take and choose and pick from, like a buffet of take it or leave it. If you want, have the rules as written, have my rules, customize your game however you want, which I think is the funnest thing.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Where can people find you online then?
I really am not the biggest on Twitter. I probably should be bigger on all those things, but really youtube.com/The Dungeon Coach. I'm also on Facebook. I kind of post some stuff on over there, but really, if any of my videos on Facebook, you can see I have a Discord. I have a super creative community there that they just help each other out. It's so awesome to see that this community is also helping each other. It's like it's alive. It's not just me and the community. It's like the community talks to itself. It's self-aware. But any of my YouTube videos in the description has links to all of the Discord and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, mainly YouTube. The Dungeon Coach is where you'll find me.
Okay. And then I will make sure that I put a link to your YouTube channel in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So anybody who is listening, if you guys would head over to dicegeeks.com, find the show notes for this episode, you will be able to find the Dungeon Coach on YouTube, as I'll put a link there in the show notes. All right, well, Alan. Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you coming on the show. We've had a really fun conversation. At least it was fun for me. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well.
This is the first interview type thing I've ever done. Like, I was like, interview? Wow, okay. And even when you introduced me, like, this is known as the Dungeon Coach. I'm like, this is crazy. So thank you for the first time experience here.
All right, no problem. Well, Alan, thank you for coming on the show today.
Appreciate it, man. You too.
All right, guys, there you have it. I really hope you enjoyed this interview with Alan today. If you want to check out some of his homebrew content and his videos, please head over to the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. You will find a link to his YouTube channel, The Dungeon Coach. Now, if you want something for free, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You'll never miss an episode of this show. You will get 10 free dungeon maps, and every Friday, you will get an email update from me telling you what is happening in the universe that is Dice Geeks. If you like this show, please consider supporting it in some way. You can leave a review, you can rate it, you can subscribe, you can share it with a friend. You could head over to patreon.com/dicegeeks and support the show financially as well. That would mean the world to me, guys. All right, now I really thank you for listening, and until next time, keep gaming.